Appreciate the invite. Not sure it came from you originally, Chris. Thank you. Appreciate that. I came in and chatted with you guys, seems like forever ago, probably almost 2 years ago now, right? The first trip to Haiti. Who's going? Who's coming in 2 weeks? We'll see you soon. Yeah. So my wife and I was thinking about this on the way here. Honey, I don't think we've ever done this. I don't think we've ever shared our testimony. This might be the very first time. So
Yeah. That's awesome.
We can't share the whole thing, or you guys would be here all night. And we're going to try not to do that because there's a lot more for you guys to do, right? You don't want to be here all night?
So we want to do it all night.
Yeah. I want to say some context for you.
Hey guys.
Context is that neither one of us grew up in a home where Jesus was it. That we were following people, our family, who was following the Lord all in. Like that wasn't our reality at all. In fact, neither one of us came to the Lord until we were in our 20s. And so I know that some of you guys in the room right now live in homes where you are being modeled. Somebody's showing you what it looks like to be all in. Some of you don't. And that's just the reality. And tonight, my hope is no matter where you are on that spectrum, no matter who is in your life that is modeling or not modeling, that your ears would be tuned into, okay, Lord, what do you have for me? Because none of you in this room are going to be held responsible for what your parents did or didn't do. You're going to be held responsible for what you did with God gave you. That's how it works. And so this verse that was planted when we first got married, it's only 7 years ago. We're a blended family, and we can go on all that another time. But 7 years ago we got married, and this verse, Psalm 127:1. Unless the Lord build the house, the laborers build in vain. That was our wedding verse. And to be truthful with you guys, I didn't even have a clue what that meant when we had that verse. I had an idea like, all right, that's some cool scripture, right? That sounds good. We need God to be in the middle of things, but even though we loved Jesus then, we didn't do what that song said. Every move I make for you. That wasn't the deal. Some moves we made for the Lord, but many we made for ourselves. And that was only 7 years ago. So that's some context for you. We'll go into a couple of stories of things that are like real, things that happen in our lives that were, I'll say, pivotal. And I expect that in your life, I know that in your life, if you're paying attention, there are going to be some pivotal things. There are going to be some things that God puts in front of you that are chances for you to move from one season of life to the next. And so here are a couple of ours. Before we go there, I almost forgot. We're going to give you some questions at the end, is what we were asked to do. And these questions have some framework that I want you to be thinking about as you hear from us. And so one of the questions asks you to think about experiencing God. When have you, how have you experienced God? That's a big deal. Think about that as you listen to us and how we've experienced God. When have you experienced conviction? When has God laid something on you, something happened in your life that you were convicted to move? Hear that in our story. And steps of obedience. What have been the steps of obedience that God's asked you to take? You hear that in our story. And all of that, when you add that together, ends up with a vision for your life. And it comes over time and step by step. But that's what that stuff makes. So experiencing God, experiencing conviction, those are things that lead you to Him. What steps you take. So Cynthia's going to go through one of our first kind of pivotal times 2 years back.
When we first got married, I'll even go back a little bit before that to set some context. When again, you just don't know what God is doing in the fullness of what He's doing. When you're moving forward, you don't always see it, but I know often when you're in a remarriage situation, people say, you're going to get married again, and I remember saying no, and then just asking God to give me what were the rocks that He wanted in that marriage relationship. And one of them was really that the person would have Christian men and accountability with Him. And so that is a big piece of our story. as we move into this life with God. And so as we got married in September of '06, one of the things that God did right as we were getting married was provided this accountability group for Adrien. Joe Kinetic, Trace Thurley, who are lifelong friends now, and he works with at the Global Orphan Project. But through that friendship and that accountability group came an opportunity for him. We were talking about mission trips, and he said, I've never been on a mission trip. I was like, you gotta go on a mission trip. You know, I've been on several with church, with youth, things like that, and you know, unbeknownst to us, God was already working where he connected with Joe Kinetic, and Joe said, do you want to go to Haiti? And so this trip was planned, and through a couple of circumstances, he didn't end up going on that first trip, and only men were being taken at that point on trips to Haiti through what was then C3 missions. And so he was not able to go, and when he could go in January of '07, they opened it up to women. And Joe asked if I would like to come and we would like to go together. And we were at that time praying about our daughter, Dora, was entering kindergarten, and I felt a burden that I should be home with her. I worked full time. I, at that point, was making a lot of money, and so the thought of staying home was giving up a lot of earthly comforts and security, and yet just this kept coming to me that I needed to be home with Adora and Malca. And so we went to Haiti, and we just knew it was going to be a time where we were just going to ask God to just remove all the obstacles for us to hear from him fully. What did he want us to do? We still had his house that he was living in before. It was just crazy context for this potential reality. And so at one point on this trip to Haiti, we were praying over a field that did not have, it had a church and a school, but they wanted homes. And I might cry, just, you know, but just, we went off together by ourselves, and I just remember looking at this land, and we began to pray, and it was our lives. We didn't know what the landscape of our lives was going to be. We knew God was in it. We wanted him to be the center. We invited him to be the center of our lives. And just like we were praying for the one day, God, we want you to bring home, we want you to bring sponsors of homes here. We want children, you know, orphaned and abandoned children to live in these homes. I wanted God to fill up our lives with himself. And so we just prayed, and I just remember experiencing God in a profound way. Because the noise, there's a freedom that I experience when I go to Haiti, but I long to live for here, getting closer and closer, and yet it's still just a freedom to just relinquish the things of the world. And so it was in that place that he could do that. Not that he can't do that here, he has. But that was the first rock. We weren't even married 6 months. And we came out of that knowing that I was to stay home and to provide the stability for kids. And so we made a budget, and it was in like brackets, meaning it was negative. And I remember sitting down, we were sitting down with Andrew, who was in college at that point, and sharing with him our budget, which was negative. And he goes, isn't this a little irresponsible? And we just knew we were supposed to. We just knew, we knew that God wanted us to do this, that this was what he was calling us to do, and we just stepped forward. And my last day of my job was March 31st. His house closed on March 31st. Circumstance of events, but by June 1st, they restructured some things and were looking for a VP of sales. Adrien got that job. It literally met our budget to the penny. I mean, God couldn't have you know, it was like, this is who I am. Boom. Like, yeah, you don't have to worry about, you just have to follow me in obedience. And so that was our first big rock. And we knew that the Global Orphan Project, that orphan and abandoned children were part of that story. And so we just kept moving forward to seek God, and I think the next step is needs to tell.
When she says that we experience God, I'm hoping that you think about that a little bit. Think about really, have you experienced the Lord? Because what you guys learn in Bible study and what you hear in sermons really doesn't begin to transform you until it's the Lord that does the work, right? So that's got to happen. So when we experience God together on that field, that was a game changer. You can't forget or remove that. That doesn't go away, you know, and that's a big deal. So even though that happened, I was still, my faith was there, but it was kind of just there. For example, I barely ever read the Word of God at that point in time. It wasn't something that I just did. And my wife had a great discipline of reading the Word of God daily. And I had every reason in the world not to, including she was telling me to, and so that was more reason for me not to. Right? So I just didn't a whole lot. And we went to a marriage conference in March, I think in 2008, it might have been 2007. And while I was there was this guy, this man's man, this guy standing on stage who, everything he said, I just seemed it, I got it, I understood it. He was the kind of guy that I kind of wanted to be like, frankly. I could see myself in him in some ways, or my wannabe self in him in some ways. And he said something one day at this marriage conference. He said, you know, I don't really like reading a whole lot either. That's me. And I kind of lose myself when I start reading the Bible. Oh, that's me too, right? But I like to eat breakfast. And I know I need to eat breakfast. That's me too. And so what I figured out one day was, every day before I eat breakfast, which is what I'm going to do, I'm going to read something. Something in the Word of God. Just something. A verse, a chapter, a devotional. I'm going to read something about the Word of God before I eat. And for whatever reason, God just used that to totally put in perspective my choices. Like, you're going to eat breakfast, right? That matters to you a lot. You can read something about me before you eat breakfast. You can just do that. And it hit me hard. It hit me in my gut. And it was a conviction. And from that time on, I just started doing it. I just started reading a verse. Literally, a verse. And that led to a few more verses. And it led to a desire for a few more. And it's now led to a habit where almost every day, I'm spending time with God in the morning. And it's not something that I feel obligated to do. It's like, I want to do that. Like, I want to eat breakfast. I want to feed myself. I want to spend time with the Lord. And that was like 7 years ago. Not even that long. You know? Another big rock in our story was in November of 2009. I was working for this company, ATI, which was awesome. Frankly, I was making a ton of money, way more than I deserved. I love the people I work with, which is more than I deserved. The company was growing. All the things you think about as a career sales guy, it was all good. Everything that I would be looking for, it was that. And in November, Joe, again, came to me, one of my best friends by that point, November 2009, and said, we need help in the ministry. We're growing, but we really need some help, and I think you're the guy. And I remember telling him two things. That very day he called me. I said, okay, Joe, if the Lord shows me that this is what He wants me to do, and I can surrender, meaning I can give up this really great gig that I've got, and all the worldly aspirations of this. If I can surrender, and this is from the Lord, I'll do it. I go home, I tell my wife, and she's like, man, God has provided for us before. If you think this is it, then I'm in. Again, we'll take a step in that direction. I consulted 3 guys who I know and love and know that they love the Lord. And one of them told me Adrien, as you pray about this, don't pray for clarity, but pray for conviction. And I've used that word a couple times now. And frankly, before then, I didn't even really know what conviction meant. I thought it was like, you did something wrong, and you're going to have a consequence because of it. But that's not really what conviction means. Conviction means you know in your heart that you need to something. Start, stop, change something. You know you need to. And you can't escape it. You can choose to ignore it, but you can't deny that you know that that is true. That's conviction. And so I began praying for that conviction, and what the Lord convicted me of was that I wasn't willing to surrender. I was sitting down with my accountant at my kitchen table, and I was a partner in my company. And what that means is you got to do your own taxes. And so here I am at the end of the year doing my own taxes, and the accountant is showing me on paper what my income is like, what money I have to give away, what money I have to pay taxes, and laying some things out for me. And as I'm looking at these numbers and I'm thinking about it, it just hits me. Adrien, you are comfortable. And you don't want to give that up. Conviction. I know that was true. And I know that I know better. From what the Lord did through us in our marriage and that story that Cynthia shared with you, I know that pursuing comfort is empty. And I have no business doing that. And so when the Lord convicted me of that comfort, I knew I had a choice. I could either submit or I could pretend, but I couldn't forget. And so I submitted. I left my company, I joined the Global Orphan Project, and again, I won't go into all the details, but I'll just put it this way. Even through my father passing away, weeks after that decision was made, the Lord provided.
And just to add, as women, we don't recognize this now, most of us are wired as women to security is probably one of our top needs. And so I am not a risk taker, and part of that process of knowing I knew we were supposed to do this is that I had no reservations, and I am usually very cautious, very concerned about being secure financially and those kinds of things, and that's kind of stability. And so that was part of that. God had already worked so powerfully through that first step of me leaving my job and providing exactly what we needed. And he is so faithful, powerfully faithful. And even when we're faithless, even when we're like, help me in my unbelief, he's like, I got this, I'm faithful. So as we have moved forward in faith with him, I want to share something that is part of this. We've asked you to, as you're kind of stepping through these areas that have framed our walk, or really this is God's story, and what he's been teaching us. I believe he wants to begin to reveal a vision for your life. Maybe not like exactly the job you're going to be doing. That God glorifying walk with him. And we haven't done it perfectly, but one of the things, I read a book called, by Chip Ingram, called Good to Great When God Dies. Years of business book called Good to Great. A lot of people are familiar with it, but part of his challenge, he goes through people studying great Christians, people who just really are thought of highly as surrendering all for God, and just looking at their practice, their lives, the things that they did that set them apart and that really impacted their lives. But one of the things is really, what is the vision God has for your life? And so I wrote down, and I can't, it's on this little card, and I can't rewrite it because I just love this card. It's weathered. It was in the summer of '08, and it's about marriage and parenting. But I want to read you what I wrote, and I continue to kind of add some words. As a follower of Christ, I wrote down loving, humble, obedient to God's will for my life, wholehearted, worshiping Him in spirit and in truth. And the other thing that I wrote was care for orphans, God-sized way. And so that was the summer of 08, and by the end of 09, we were considering this. And so God was already preparing my heart. I thought it was going to be, I was engaged in GOP, already volunteering my time and that kind of stuff, and I just thought it would be more of that. I had no idea what God was doing. But the other thing He was doing in terms of orphan care was He brought a grandparent family into our lives through church. We got connected with Bob and Marilyn Lemming, who were here through us. They had guardianship of 2 of their grandkids that had moved here to be with them from Oregon. And the Lord just put us together. We were just drawn to them, and we, unbeknownst to us, began really providing respite for them. They're in their 70s. They're trying to raise an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, I think, at that time. And so we just did life with them. We'd pick the kids up, take them to stuff, have them with us for the day. Just started doing life. And all of a sudden, my eyes were open to this, and my heart was open that, oh my goodness, I'm in southern Johnson County, and how many more of these are going on around me that I have no idea. I felt like I was blind to something, as though, the Bible talks about just the veil or the scales being taken off your eyes. All of a sudden I was like, is this really this big of an issue? And all of a sudden, yes. So I started learning more and understanding more, and we prayed about whether we were supposed to adopt them. They really wanted us to pursue adopting them. Lots of reasons with the older child that wouldn't be a possibility for us, but just kept praying and loving on them. But God was just breaking open a hole in our hearts for children in foster care. And so we began the process of MAP training, and we are looking into becoming approved to do foster care. And so we kept looking for windows of this 10 weeks. We had 10 weeks, and we can't miss more than 2. And it just wasn't there with his travel schedule and things that were going on. And all of a sudden, he was supposed to go to Africa in the summer of 2010, 11. And so that wasn't another possibility. It wasn't open. All of a sudden, he just felt again this conviction. I'm not supposed to go on this trip. I'm not needed on this trip. And that will open up this window that we need for MAP training. And so he didn't go. And we went through the MAP class that summer and became approved by the following spring. And I will say, I didn't want to enter this world of foster care and adoption. More foster care. The more you get in it, it's scary. I was afraid of what it was going to do to our family, our kids. I was comfortable. I liked the routine of life, and I knew this was going to be a game changer. And yet this conviction just kept growing in my heart. And so he went to Africa over, I can't remember the dates, after we had gone through MAP, and he said, that was in MAP, sorry. A part of that process was, were we going to foster or were we going to adopt? And we came to a place where both of us at separate times were convicted that the Lord wanted us to adopt through foster care. And so we came together and I said, hey, this is what's been going on. And he's like, wow, this is what's been going on in me. Convicted, began to pray, and we are now in that process. We had 2 little boys. Benjamin and Curtis came to live with us last May. For 7 months, we really thought that the Lord was bringing us the boys bringing us the children we were going to adopt. Although we thought he was just going to bring 1, and they were going to be school age, and they were toddlers, and they were siblings. And again, God's so in charge of all of this. But it wasn't God's plan. And honestly, our hearts are broken. God has expanded our capacity to love, but we're still human. And we want Him to continue to grow that capacity to love because we know we're supposed to be doing this, but yet it's hard to lay yourself out there for what He's asking you to do when you're not being involved. And so, yet we knew. And so on December 1st, we transitioned them to one of their grandmothers, who is the adopted resource for them. And on February 18th, the Lord brought 2 little girls to our home that for an emergency respite situation, and their siblings, and we're walking by faith, not knowing what the end of the story is going to be for them. Their parental rights are not terminated, and I kind of describe life right now. I think I said to Kristen that it's so hard for me to say we gave up or I gave up. When you think about the Lord, what Jesus sacrificed for us, it's so nothing compared to that, and yet He meets us so full of grace because He knows our weaknesses, and our pain. But the life that I think what we have given up is the false notion that our life is our own to determine. My life was purchased on the cross. Our lives were purchased. And what He's given us is this supernatural purpose. And in this time of all of this happening, our children have come to faith. His mom has come to faith. Sister. So I wouldn't have traded that. I was thinking about the fruit of obedience. Sometimes the cost of obedience feels high, but you wouldn't want to miss the fruit of obedience. And so while you may give up some of the comforts and there may be pain involved, the presence of God and knowing that you are being used for His purposes, and the fruit that you get to be a part of in terms of the lives that are changed, your own and others in that process. You don't want to miss that.
Got nothing. Yeah, no, but. So, I think I should pray. And then we'll move in. Father, we know that the things that stand between us and you have nothing to do with you and everything to do with us. And all of our woundedness, from broken promises of other people, the hypocrisy that we see, the things we find hard to believe, and our sin. Father, on behalf of these kids, and adults in this room, I ask you to forgive us for allowing our sin and our lies to cloud our vision. And I thank you for that forgiveness. And I ask you for the people in this room, Lord, who do not know you yet, who have not experienced you themselves yet. For the people in this room, Lord, who have no idea what it means to be obedient, who have not felt your presence, Lord. I pray that you would touch them. I pray that you would do what no one on this planet can do except for you. Because only then will it be real. All the things that you've asked us to do, Lord, are nothing except opportunity to be part of your story. And to become more like your Son, and to give up the things that we think matter so much for things that are much more important, and things that